Hello and welcome to Selective Preparation Power Reading Test 53. So today our first text is a poem, The Blue Mountains by Henry Lawson. So in the test, you would first read through the text, the given text, in this case the poem, in its entirety, and then go on to look at the questions. Because this is a guided answer video, what we will do is we will assume that you read the text in the test, and just go on to answer the questions here. But it is of very high importance that you read through the text before you look through the questions in the test. So question 1 is on the themes present in the poem. And what we do when we get a question in a reading comprehension test is to underline it for key words and phrases. So here it is, what is the theme of verse 2? And the key words and phrases are theme and verse 2. That tells us where to look and what to look for. So the question is telling us to look in verse 2 for its theme. Right, so let's go back to verse 2. Like ramparts round the valley's edge, the tinted cliffs are standing, with many a broken wall and ledge, and many a rocky landing. So what we do is when we go back to the text, we would look through it and underline it as well. And again, in the test, as you would have already read through the poem in its entirety, you would already have an idea of what verse 2 might have been about, but you would still go back and double check by cross-checking the key words and phrases in the verse with the question. So for example, keywords here seem to be, there's tinted cliffs, there's covered cliffs that are standing around the valley, and they've got rocky landings, and they've got broken walls and ledges, so broken colored cliffs standing around the valley. And then when we look at the given list of potential answers, that seems to most closely match A. The mountains are colored cliffs with broken areas, which shows that A is our answer. And we get that by cross-checking keywords and phrases. So again, the answer to question 1 is A. The mountains are colored cliffs with broken areas. Question 2 is also on themes, and we do the same thing as we did in question 1 by underlining key words and phrases. So theme of verse 6, that's telling us to go to verse 6 and look for its theme. We could also look through the list of potential answers. So it could be A, it is morning and the sun appears. B, at noon the area is very bright. C, late in the day it is cool, or at sundown the colors change. That's D, right? So what we could do by looking at the potential answers is cross-check keywords or phrases from the potential answers with the verse to see which option is our answer. So let's go back to verse 6. Now in the west the colors change. That matches what we saw in the potential answer option of D. So colors is changing. And also if we look here in the west, that's another clue. What happens in the west? The sun sets in the west. So that's implicitly telling us that the sun is setting and the colors are changing. The blue with crimson blending behind the far dividing range, the sun is fast descending. This tells us explicitly the sun is setting. It's descending, that means it's setting. So then we know with certainty that our answer is D. At sundown, the colors change, and that's the theme of verse 6. Question 3 looks at quote analysis, and it asks us, why is it that in the dells, so keyword dells, dust and heat are forbidden? So this is an example of why it's really important that you read the whole text before you look at the questions, because if you have read the whole text, then you know you have a general sense of where or what stanza or what verse talks about dells or dust or heat or why it's forbidden, right? But yes, looking at the question, we know that we want to check for why dust and heat are forbidden in dells. Those are our key words. And then our potential answers are that A, it is an overcast day, B, the dells are very deep, C, the area is in bright sunshine, or D, clouds from above the valleys. So if we go back to the poem, we know that the last 3 stanzas from reading the poem first before looking at the questions, as we would in the test, we know that the last 3 stanzas don't seem to have anything on dells or dust and heat or forbidden. Then we go on to the first 3 stanzas and we see that stanza 3 or verse 3 talks about dells and dust and heat. And then, so we underline keywords and phrases here as well. Dells, dust and heat, forbidden. So, and round about their rugged feet, deep, ferny dells are hidden in shadowed depths, whence dust and heat are banished and forbidden. So by underlining keywords, we see the connection. We see that whence dust and heat. So whence means dust and heat are forbidden because of these shadowed depths. And we see that the depth of these dells are emphasized. So we know that the answer has to do with the depths of the dell. And that matches with option B, which is our answer. The dells are very deep. And that is how we get the answer to question 3. Then we go into question 4, which looks at purpose. And the question is asking for what is the writer's purpose. And again, this is more of an overall question about the poem itself rather than individual verses or stanzas or lines or quotes. And this is why it's important, once again, to have read the poem in its entirety. And purpose, a writer's purpose, is always related to themes, quotes, lines, analysis, the reasons why they chose to write the way they did to get across the message that they wanted to get across. So we would have read the poem and gotten a general idea of what they were trying to get across. But even in just the verses that we've looked at in this video, the verses that we've read together, so that's verse 3 and 6 and 2. So 3 was the verse on dells and heat and dust. We can, just from reading those, we know that there's nothing in the poem about why it was discovered or how it was discovered. There's nothing warning of the dangers. There's nothing in the poem that screams, oh, beware, don't come here because it's dangerous. And for D, there's nothing about there's no description of crossing the mountains either. And then looking back at what we did read together, we know that imagery was used to describe the sceneries of the mountains, the beauty, so we know that C is our answer. The writer's purpose is to describe the beauty of the Blue Mountains region. Now we get on to the second half of our video, which is looking at text 2. And text 2 is a closed passage. So closed passages are texts with certain sentences or parts missing, and you have to use context clues. So the sentences around the missing parts to figure out what statements would best fit the gaps. Okay, so the second text is The Girl from Balmain, which is a story of Australian Olympian Dawn Fraser. And what we do here is we look at the questions. So the text above has 6 parts removed from it. So 6 options, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. You have to choose sentences from the list below, A to G, that best fill the gaps which match the numbers in the text, 5 to 10. There will be 1 extra sentence that is not needed. That's important to note. So we know that there's 1 sentence that's just not going to be used. So 4 choices will be given for each gap. What we do here is we look at each of the questions. So let's look at question 5. We look at question 5 and the options given are either sentence A, B, D, or G. What we do now is we try and substitute statements A, B, D, and G into question 5 to see if it makes sense. So 5A, for some time he watched Dawn and some other swimmers who were practicing. As he watched, he realized that she was quite a lot faster than the others. We try and substitute that into 5 and see if it makes sense. When we substitute, we read the sentence before the substitution and we read the sentence after it. So we would read, in March 1953, a swimming coach, Harry Gallagher, stood at the side of the pool at Balmain. For some time, he watched Dawn and some other swimmers who were practicing. As he watched, he realized that she was quite a lot faster than the others. Harry Gallagher was sure that if he could persuade Dawn to take swimming seriously, she would become a champion. A seems to make perfect sense here. So for now, we will put 5A, cross out A, and then let's look at the options for 6. The options given for 6 are B, D, F, or G. So we try and substitute each of these options into 6 to see if they make sense. So B, let's try and substitute B. So again, we read the sentence before the substitution first. On 1 December, Dawn won her first Olympic gold medal in the 100 meters freestyle final. B, it was expected that the final would be a very close contest. The American girl swam with a very graceful and rhythmic style and was very fast. Already we can tell that something's not quite right and B doesn't seem to make sense because the second sentence here, the American girl, there was nothing in the sentence before the substitution that said anything about an American girl. So that seems out of place. And then when we finish, when we read the following sentence, it was a great victory for the Australian team because in second and third place were two of Dawn's teammates, Lorraine Crapp and Faith Leach. Again, no mention of the American girl, so that little bit of information seems out of place here. It doesn't make sense. So we can rule out B for 6. The other option was D, so let's try and substitute D into 6. On 1 December, Dawn won her first Olympic gold medal in the 100 meters freestyle final. She turned through the water to take the race in the new world record time of 62 seconds. It was a great victory for the Australian team because in second and third place were two of Dawn's teammates, Lorraine Crapp and Faith Leach. D seems to make sense here, so we will put down D for 6. Of course, in the test, you would also go through the other options to check if they make more sense in the given context. But here, we know that the answer is D because this is the answer video. So I will just stop at D to show you how it's done. So again, 5 was A, 6 is B. 7, the options given are A, C, E, and G. So let's try and substitute. We do the same thing again. We try and substitute the given statements. So we already know that A belongs to 5, so we can rule out A. We don't need to substitute A. So let's try and substitute C into 7. Okay? So 7, we read the statement beforehand. During the next 4 years, Dawn was swimming exceptionally well, and it seemed certain that she would win the 100 meters title at the next Olympic Games. Unfortunately, Dawn placed third in the finals. The 100 meters event turned out to be a very interesting race. Okay, C could make sense following this first statement during the next 4 years, but it doesn't seem to make sense before the 100 meters event turned out to be a very interesting race. So let's try and substitute E instead. Despite her great performances, okay. So, Dawn was swimming exceptionally well and it seemed certain that she would win the 100 meters title at the next Olympic Games. Despite her great performances, some did not consider it possible that she could fulfill her ambition. Ambition is an interesting word because there's nothing mentioning ambition here. In fact, the statement before 7 is just talking about how she was doing well. So E doesn't seem to make sense. So then we try and see if G makes sense. During the next 4 years, Dawn was swimming exceptionally well and it seemed certain that she would win the 100 meters title at the next Olympic Games. In 1960, the Games were to be held in Rome and Dawn was the favorite for the event. In the 100 meters event turned out to be a very interesting race. So far, G seems to make the most sense here because certain parts of G, for example, the Games and the favorite for the event, make sense with what we're told before the substitution of 7. Which was that it seems certain that she would win and that the Olympic Games are mentioned. So G seems to make the most sense here because it continues on with the information we're given beforehand and fills in more details, like telling us that it's 1960 and that it's being held in Rome. So it seems like it is a good substitution for the information that we're given beforehand and also information that's missing. So 7 is G. And then 8. So for 8, the options given are B, D, F, and G. We've already ruled out G, so we're not going to try and substitute G here. We've also ruled out D, so we're going to try and substitute B and F for 8. So 8, the statement before 8 is, in one of the qualifying heats, the 16-year-old American girl, Chris von Salzer, equaled the Olympic record time that Dawn had set in Melbourne. It was expected that the final would be a very close contest. The American girl swam with a very graceful and rhythmic style and was very fast. Dawn was determined to win this final and pulled away powerfully from her American rival to win in a little over 61 seconds. B seems to make perfect sense here because information such as the introduction of the American girl and then mention of the American girl in B and then the follow-up of said American girl here as her American rival all completes the missing picture, right? And it also tells us that she wins in a little over 61 seconds, especially after they tell us that it would be a close contest. So B seems to make sense. Just in case, we'll still try and substitute F. Soon the final of the 100 meters freestyle was about to begin. Let's try that. The 100 meters event turned out to be a very interesting race. In one of the qualifying heats, the 16-year-old American girl Chris Von Salter equaled the Olympic record time that Dawn had set in Melbourne. Soon the 100 meters event was about to begin. Dawn was determined to win this final and pulled away powerfully from her American rival. So F here kind of makes sense in that we follow up on the 100 meter event pre-heats, or yes, the qualifying heats, sorry. And we follow up with the actual race beginning. However, B makes more sense because it tells us that it was meant that the race was predicted to be a very close contest, and then Dawn actually pulled away. So it fills in the missing information better than F. So our answer for 8 is B. Our answer for 8 is option B. And then we do 9. So once again, we've ruled out options A. We've ruled out option G. We've also ruled out, we haven't ruled out option C or E. So let's try and substitute C and E into question 9. So question 9. At this point in her life, the ambition to become the only swimmer to win a gold medal in the same event at 3 successive games drove Dawn on. Ambition seems to be a key word here because we did notice ambition in one of the option statements, right? So let's try and substitute C. Unfortunately, Dawn placed 3rd in the finals. During March 1964, a tragic accident took place. C doesn't make sense here because how do we go from talking about Dawn placing 3rd in the finals to a tragic accident occurring? That seems like quite a bit of a jump and it doesn't make sense. So we try and substitute E instead. And we also notice that E has the keyword that we were looking for, or the keyword that we noticed, ambition. So at this point in her life, the ambition to become the only swimmer to win a gold medal in the same event at 3 successive games drove Dawn on. Despite her great performances, some did not consider it possible that she could fulfill her ambition. So E makes perfect sense for 9. So we know that 9 is E by matching keywords. All right, then we get to 10, our final question. And by now we've ruled a lot of the options out. So we've ruled out option B because that was for statement 8. We haven't ruled out option C. We have ruled out option D. And we haven't ruled out option F. So we try and substitute options C and F into question 10. So again, we read the question before the substitution, the statement before the substitution. Many world records had been broken and the American team was particularly strong. Then we try and substitute C because C is the other option that we have left. Unfortunately, Dawn placed 3rd in the finals. To win the event, Dawn must swim the race of her life. That doesn't make sense. How can she place 3rd in the finals and then go on to talk about winning the event? So C already doesn't make sense. Then we try option F. Many world records had been broken and the American team was particularly strong. Soon the final of the 100 meters freestyle was about to begin. To win the event, Dawn must swim the race of her life. F makes perfect sense there, so we know that question 10 is F. And there we have our final answers to the closed passage, which we got by matching keywords and substituting context clues. So that leads us to the end of this video, and the key points from this test is that poetry analysis involves themes. You can summarize the theme of a verse or stanza by looking at the techniques used in each line to draw the overall meaning of not only the line or the stanza or verse, but also contributing to the overall meaning of the poem. Which brings us to our next point, which is that themes in different sections make up the overall meaning of the text, and the meaning of text is always related to its purpose. And then relating to not just overall questions, but also specifically the closed passage, you must underline keywords and phrases in questions and match to keywords and phrases in the text to find answers. And that will always get you to the correct answer. That's all for this video. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.